Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time, we'll be taking a look at the Renaissance.
Oh, a fascinating period.
It is.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from the Wikipedia article on the Renaissance
Mm.
to guide us, and we're going to be looking at what exactly made this era so unique. Where it all started,
Mm-hmm.
what made it so revolutionary.
Absolutely.
So you ready to jump in?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the Renaissance is interesting because it wasn't like one specific thing that happened.
Right.
It was more like a wave of changes over centuries in Europe,
Yeah.
moving from the medieval world into the beginnings of, what we think of as modernity.
Exactly. And it's funny because I was looking at the different timelines that historians have proposed.
Yeah.
And some call it a long Renaissance
Yeah.
that goes from the 14th to the 17th centuries.
Right.
Some just say the 15th and 16th.
Yeah.
It makes you think, like, is it even possible to define an era so neatly?
History is full of these gray areas. But I think what we can say for sure is that a huge part of the Renaissance was this rediscovering and reinterpreting of classical antiquity. It's like a rebirth, as the Italian word rinascita suggests.
Yeah, a rebirth.
But then the question becomes, why did this rebirth happen in Florence, of all places?
That's what I was thinking. Why Florence and not like Paris or London?
Right.
What was it about Florence?
Historians have a few different theories about this. One is that Florence had this really unique set of political and social structures, especially its powerful merchant class.
Okay.
So while much of Europe was ruled by kings, Italian cities like Florence were more like independent republics.
And more freedom.
Exactly, and a focus on commerce.
Yeah, that makes sense. Our sources also mention the Medici family. I mean, they were huge patrons of the arts.
They were absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Their wealth fueled artistic innovation, and the competition for their patronage really pushed artists to be better.
Oh, wow.
So it's no coincidence that so many of the biggest names came out of Florence.
Yeah, it's crazy that, like, those names still hold so much weight today,
Yeah.
Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli.
For sure.
Like, what is it about their work? Why do you think that their work is still so appealing even now?
It's really interesting to think about. I think a big part of it is this spirit of humanism that you see all throughout Renaissance art. Humanism wasn't really like a strict philosophy,
Okay.
more a way of learning that emphasized human potential and achievement.
Okay.
So humanists would study ancient Greek and Roman texts, not just for the content, but to learn how to think critically
Oh, wow.
and to apply reason to the world around them.
So they weren't just, like, blindly accepting whatever they were told.
Exactly.
They were encouraged to question things, to explore,
Yeah.
and that led to new discoveries.
Precisely. And you see this in everything from art and science to religion.
Yeah.
In art, there's this huge shift toward realism. Artists like Masaccio, he pioneered linear perspective
Yeah.
to make paintings look like windows into real space.
Yeah, and then you've got Leonardo da Vinci, who was not just an artist, but a scientist,
Yeah.
an inventor.
Yeah.
Those anatomical drawings that he did really show that blurring of art and science, don't they?
They absolutely do. And on top of that, you have the printing press around 1440.
Yeah.
It revolutionized how knowledge spread, making books available to a much wider audience.
It's almost like suddenly everyone was invited to the discussion.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the scholars
Exactly.
and the elites,
Yeah, it challenged those traditional power structures.
Wow.
And contributed to other shifts in Europe, like the Reformation.
Okay, yeah.
We'll get to that, but before we go too far, maybe we can look at some of the specific ways that the Renaissance changed things.
Okay.
Starting with libraries. I
Yeah.
wonder if they were anything like the libraries we know today.
That's such a good question, yeah. Because I always think of, like, dusty old books.
Yeah.
Like scholars whispering.
Yeah, in dimly lit rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's really cool is that some of these libraries were actually open to the public.
Really?
Yeah. Reading was celebrated as enriching both the mind and the soul.
Wow.
So these libraries were places where people could gather to exchange ideas
Oh, wow.
and to engage with a wide variety of texts, not just the classics, but also humanist works.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just about, like, quiet study.
No.
People were actually gathering to debate and discuss ideas.
Exactly.
It's almost like a proto-coffee house.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this idea of intellectual freedom was also reflected in what those libraries contained.
Yeah.
They'd have the classic Greek and Roman works, but also contemporary humanist writings.
Mhm.
So there's this amazing dialogue between the past and present.
I can only imagine the conversations that those books sparked, but I bet organizing all that knowledge was not easy.
Right?
Did they even have catalogs back then?
Well, they definitely did. Catalogs were absolutely essential
Oh, wow.
to make these growing collections accessible and manageable.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they were already dealing with information overload back then, just like we are today.
I know. Like, we've got search engines and databases,
Right.
and they had their meticulously crafted catalogs.
Exactly.
And speaking of meticulous, I bet some of these libraries were housed in beautiful, grand buildings.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Wealthy book lovers would create these impressive libraries,
Wow.
almost like temples dedicated to learning,
Yeah.
adorned with frescoes
Uh-huh.
and intricate woodwork,
Wow.
grand architectural details, really emphasizing that importance.
So it wasn't just about the books themselves.
Yeah.
They understood the importance of creating those spaces that inspired awe and a love of learning.
Exactly.
That's so cool. It sounds like a far cry from our sterile modern libraries today.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we've lost a little bit of that wonder
Yeah.
in our modern approach to libraries.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something to be said for creating these spaces that elevate learning and make it more immersive.
I think so, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another area where the Renaissance really, really left its mark.
Okay.
Art.
Yes. We've talked about realism and those techniques like linear perspective,
Yeah.
but what else set Renaissance art apart?
Yeah.
Well, besides the incredible skill, Renaissance artists were obsessed with depicting the beauty of nature and exploring the principles of aesthetics.
Mm.
Think about Leonardo's Mona Lisa, Michelangelo's David.
Yeah.
They captured this human emotion, this physical perfection that was really missing from medieval art.
What do you think it is about those works that continues to draw us in?
It's interesting. I think it's that timeless quality,
Yeah.
that ability to connect with something deeply human that goes beyond any cultural or historical boundaries.
Yeah.
It's like they tapped into something universal that
Yeah.
still resonates today.
But it wasn't just Florence, right? This wave of the Renaissance spread all across Italy
It did, yeah.
and then to the rest of Europe.
Yeah,
So did this change the art itself?
absolutely. As it spread, the Renaissance adapted to different cultural contexts.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Low Countries, you have the Van Eyck brothers,
Yep.
pioneers of oil painting,
Mm-hmm.
and later, Peter Bruegel the Elder, known for his incredibly detailed scenes of everyday life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how each region brought its own flavor.
They did.
Yeah. Okay, what about architecture?
Oh, architecture.
Were there any, key elements that defined the Renaissance architectural style?
Well, one of the biggest influences was the rediscovery of ancient Roman architecture.
Okay.
Figures like Filippo Brunelleschi really sought to revive and even improve on these classical forms.
Mm-hmm.
So they incorporated things like columns, pilasters, arches
Yeah.
to create this sense of harmony and balance
Yeah.
in their buildings.
So it seems like they weren't just copying the Romans.
No, not at all.
They were innovating, building upon those ancient principles.
Exactly.
Okay, was Brunelleschi also the one behind the dome of the Florence Cathedral?
He was, yeah. It was an incredible feat of engineering,
Wow.
pushing the boundaries of what was even possible at the time.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Or the Basilica of Sant'Andrea in Mantua, designed by Leon Battista Alberti.
I'm always blown away by the scale and the grandeur of those buildings.
Yeah, me too.
It's like they were making a statement, about human potential and the power of creativity.
They weren't just building structures, they were creating works of art. And this innovative spirit wasn't limited to grand structures.
Okay.
They were also focused on public spaces,
Okay.
functional and aesthetically pleasing,
Yeah.
to foster civic pride and community.
That makes sense. So they weren't just building for the elite.
No, not at all.
They were thinking about how design could impact everyday life.
Exactly.
Okay, but it wasn't just art and architecture flourishing. Science was also undergoing this huge transformation, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. The Renaissance was a turning point for science.
Okay.
And as we said earlier, the early humanists, they were focused more on humanities, but more and more people were starting to question the traditional scientific ideas.
Yeah.
And were looking for new answers based on observation and experimentation.
What do you think triggered that shift?
Well, we've already talked about the rediscovery of ancient texts and the invention of the printing press.
Yeah.
So having access to these classical texts really sparked people's curiosity.
Right.
And then the printing press allowed those new ideas to spread like wildfire.
Wow.
And then, of course, you have the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus in 1492.
Oh, yeah.
That really shook things up.
What do you think it must have been like to realize that there was this whole other continent out there?
It must have been mind-blowing, like
Yeah.
realizing the map you've been using your whole life is incomplete.
Exactly. It must have challenged everything they thought they knew about the world.
It did. It opened up this whole new realm of possibilities and fueled the desire to explore
Yeah.
and to understand the world in new ways.
Okay, so which scientific breakthroughs from this era do you think had the most lasting impact?
Well, you have Leonardo da Vinci,
Okay.
who was doing experiments on water flow, anatomy, even aerodynamics. He's the ultimate Renaissance polymath,
Yeah.
excelling in so many different fields.
Hmm.
And then there's Nicholas Copernicus,
Okay.
who challenged the idea that the Earth was the center of the universe,
Right.
saying that the Earth actually revolves around the sun.
That was huge.
Huge, a total paradigm shift.
Yeah. What about Andreas Vesalius
Ah, Vesalius.
and his work on anatomy?
Yeah, he was dissecting human bodies
Wow.
and creating incredibly detailed drawings of them, really paving the way for a more empirical approach to medicine
Wow.
and challenging centuries of medical dogma.
It's crazy to think how far we've come in medicine since then.
I know.
And it all started with people like him.
Yeah, pioneers like him,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
It makes you wonder what they would think of the world today.
It does. And speaking of pushing boundaries, we can't forget about all the incredible voyages and discoveries of this era.
Yes.
Explorers like Vasco da Gama, Ferdinand Magellan, and of course, Christopher Columbus, sailing to uncharted territories,
Wow.
mapping new lands,
Yeah.
totally changing our understanding of the globe.
What do you think motivated them to take such huge risks?
I think it must have been a combination of things.
Okay.
Curiosity, ambition,
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit of restlessness.
Yeah.
They wanted to see what was beyond the horizon.
It's inspiring and terrifying at the same time.
I agree. It was an exciting and dangerous time to be an explorer.
Yeah.
And these voyages brought back new knowledge, new goods, new ideas,
Yeah.
contributing to this cultural exchange at the heart of the Renaissance.
So it seems like the Renaissance was a time when the boundaries of human knowledge were constantly being redefined,
Yeah.
both literally and figuratively. But amid all of this exploration and innovation,
Yeah.
what was happening with music?
Music was also evolving alongside everything else.
Okay.
The Renaissance saw this new musical language that unified much of Europe. This polyphonic style developed by the Franco-Flemish school.
Okay.
And just like with knowledge, the printing press revolutionized music.
Yeah, I can imagine suddenly sheet music became more available.
Exactly.
So people could learn new pieces more easily.
Exactly. The demand for music grew,
Wow.
not just as entertainment for the wealthy, but as an activity for educated amateurs.
Wow. Okay, so that led to the rise of composers like Palestrina, Lassus, and Bird.
Exactly. They created some of the most iconic choral works of the Renaissance.
It's incredible how all of these different aspects of culture, art, science, music, exploration, they were all evolving together, feeding off of each other's energy,
Yeah.
and just creating this really dynamic and fertile period,
It was electrifying to be alive then.
I bet. But as with any time of great change,
Yeah.
there were also challenges and conflicts, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the realm of religion.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about that because it's interesting how the Renaissance, which focused so much on human reason and worldly pursuits, happened during this time of religious turmoil.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that this was a time of major upheaval within the Catholic Church. You had the Western Schism, where multiple popes claimed authority,
Oh, wow.
and there were accusations of corruption flying around everywhere.
So people were starting to question not just the world around them,
Yeah,
but also the spiritual authorities they had long trusted.
exactly.
So the Renaissance wasn't just about looking back to the classics. It was about questioning everything, challenging the status quo, even in religion.
Precisely. And that questioning, combined with humanist ideas,
Yeah.
led to calls for reform within the church. So you have thinkers like Erasmus and Martin Luther. They used their studies of ancient texts to challenge the church's practices and doctrines,
Wow.
which ultimately paved the way for the Protestant Reformation.
It's wild to think that the Renaissance, which came out of Christian Europe, actually contributed to one of the biggest religious upheavals in history.
It is.
So with all this questioning and challenging of authority, did the people living through this time actually use the term Renaissance?
Well, not exactly in the way that we use it today.
Okay.
But they were very aware that something major was happening.
Yeah.
They knew there was this revival of classical ideas.
Okay.
They would use terms like modi antici,
Okay.
which means in the antique manner, or alla romana et all'antica,
Okay.
in the manner of the Romans and the ancients,
Wow.
to describe their work.
So they knew they were drawing inspiration from the past.
Yes.
But were they aware that they were creating something totally new?
That's the big question. And there were thinkers who did recognize the significance of the period as a distinct era.
Okay. Who?
Historians like Petrarch and Leonardo Bruni.
Okay.
They were developing ideas about periodization,
Okay.
recognizing this new era as a break from the Middle Ages.
Wow.
And Giorgio Vasari, in his Lives of the Artists, he used the term rinascita.
Okay. Which means rebirth.
Exactly. He was emphasizing the idea of a cultural revival.
Wow.
This conscious effort to break from the Gothic art of the Middle Ages.
It's amazing to think that these Renaissance figures weren't just shaping history.
I know.
They were analyzing it and categorizing it.
Yeah.
And they knew they were part of something special.
They did.
But this Rinascita, this rebirth,
Yeah.
it didn't just stay in Italy, right?
No, it spread throughout Europe,
It spread.
influencing different cultures in different ways.
Yeah, okay, so like the English Renaissance,
Yeah.
that gave us William Shakespeare and the Elizabethan theater scene.
It did.
What do you think about when you think of Shakespeare?
I think about his incredible ability to capture the range of human emotion. His plays are just timeless.
Yeah.
They continue to resonate with audiences all over the world.
Totally agree. He's a major figure.
Yeah, definitely.
What about France? How did the Renaissance show up in France?
France really embraced the Renaissance.
Okay.
King Francis I was a huge patron of the arts.
Oh, wow.
He was importing Italian artists,
Wow.
commissioning these extravagant palaces.
It sounds very French.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Think about writers like François Rabelais and Michel de Montaigne.
Okay. Yeah.
They brought those Renaissance ideals into French literature.
Okay.
And then you have artists like Jean Clouet,
Okay.
who captured the spirit of the era in their portraits.
So it was like a combination of Italian influence and French expression.
Exactly.
And now Germany, now did the Reformation, like the religious upheaval, overshadow the cultural impact there?
It's interesting because in Germany,
Yeah.
the Renaissance was very tied to the Reformation. So you still have those humanist ideas taking root, but those medieval influences stayed strong too,
Okay.
leading to a slower change in
Yeah.
style and philosophy.
Interesting.
But even in that context, you have figures like Albrecht Dürer,
Okay.
who really embraced the Renaissance spirit.
Okay.
And you see that in his artwork, both the innovations and the religious tensions of the time.
So we've got this burst of creativity happening across Europe
Yeah.
in art, architecture, science, religion.
Yeah.
It's incredible how the Renaissance touched so many different parts of life.
It really is. It makes you wonder how it unfolded in other regions, too.
Yeah, like Hungary or the Netherlands.
Exactly. And that's what we'll pick up next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Welcome back. Last time we were talking about how the Renaissance went beyond Italy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It took on these unique characteristics in other parts of Europe. So let's look at some of those regional variations.
Yeah, I'm really curious about Hungary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't really know much about their experience with the Renaissance.
Okay.
Did they embrace those Italian ideas or did they create something totally different?
Well, it's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
They were one of the first countries outside Italy to really get into the Renaissance.
Wow, okay.
They blended those Italian influences with their own local traditions.
I see.
Yeah.
How did those Italian ideas even get to Hungary?
That's a good question.
Was it trade routes?
Yeah, it seems like a combination of things. They already had these strong ties with Italy going back to the 14th century, connections through royal families, cultural and commercial exchanges.
So it was like this cross-pollination of ideas flowing along with the trade routes and marriages and things.
Exactly. And you see it in their architecture, too.
Okay.
Their Gothic architecture already had some similarities with Italian trends. So the shift towards Renaissance architecture felt really natural for them. Yeah, and there was this one figure who really championed the Hungarian Renaissance.
Okay, cool.
King Matthias Corvinus.
A king.
Yeah, he ruled in the late 15th century.
Wow, a king who embraced the Renaissance.
He was a major patron of the arts.
Oh, wow.
And really pushed for those Renaissance ideas in Hungary.
That's cool.
Yeah, he rebuilt the royal castle of Buda in that new style and made it this center for Renaissance art and culture.
So he was really serious about that.
Oh, yeah. He even commissioned some of the leading Italian artists of the time.
Oh, wow. Like who?
Benedetto da Majano, Filippino Lippi, Andrea Mantegna.
Wow, he was assembling like a dream team of Renaissance talent.
Right. And there are even accounts that he tried to get Leonardo da Vinci to come to Hungary for a special project.
Oh, wow.
It's not clear if that actually happened, but
That would have been amazing.
I know, right?
It sounds like he was really determined to put Hungary on the map as this like Renaissance hub.
He was,
Yeah.
and his efforts went beyond art and architecture.
Okay.
He was also a huge book collector.
Really?
Yeah, his library, the Bibliotheca Corviniana,
Wow.
was one of the largest and most impressive collections in all of Europe.
Wow, like rivaling the Vatican.
Yeah, rivaling even the Vatican Library.
That's incredible. So
Yeah.
he wasn't just a patron of the arts.
No.
He really valued knowledge and scholarship.
Absolutely.
It sounds like he was a true Renaissance man.
He was.
Yeah.
And his library wasn't just for show.
Okay.
King Matthias was known to surround himself with humanists engaging in these big intellectual discussions.
So he was passionate about learning and encouraging others to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. It's inspiring to see how one person can really impact a nation's culture.
It is, it is.
So we've seen how those Italian Renaissance ideas took root in Hungary,
Yes.
blended with local traditions, flourished under the patronage of King Matthias.
Yes.
Now we can't forget about the Northern Renaissance.
Right, right.
It had its own unique character. So what were some of the key differences between the Italian Renaissance and its Northern counterpart?
Well, one of the big differences is that the Italian Renaissance had this more secular, humanistic spirit,
Okay.
but the Northern Renaissance was really deeply tied to religion,
Oh, interesting.
especially with all the upheaval of the Reformation going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that doesn't mean they rejected humanism entirely.
Oh.
Northern humanist scholars were still studying those ancient texts, pursuing knowledge.
Okay.
They just applied those ideas within their own cultural and religious context.
So it was like a different flavor of humanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One that took into account the religious landscape of Northern Europe.
Okay. Okay. And did this affect their art as well?
Absolutely. Albrecht Dürer, a major German artist,
Okay.
he often depicted religious subjects,
Mm-hmm.
but he infused them with this incredible realism and attention to detail.
Wow.
And he drew inspiration from those Italian Renaissance techniques.
It's so fascinating how those artists were adapting and reinterpreting the Italian ideas to fit their own cultures.
It is, yeah.
And speaking of techniques, weren't the Van Eyck brothers in the Low Countries
Yes.
the masters of oil painting?
They were, yeah. They revolutionized painting with their incredibly detailed and vibrant works.
Yeah.
Oil paint allowed them to create these luminous effects and capture the textures of fabrics and materials so precisely.
It's amazing how they achieved that level of realism
It is, yeah.
so long ago.
Centuries before photography.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Did they also focus on religious themes?
They did paint some religious scenes.
Okay.
But they were also pioneers in depicting everyday life.
Oh, wow.
Peter Bruegel the Elder, another artist from that region,
Okay.
is a great example.
Okay.
His scenes of peasant life, festivals,
Yeah.
landscapes,
Yeah.
they give us this glimpse into the world of ordinary people.
It's like he was a documentary filmmaker,
Right.
capturing those moments
Yeah.
for us to see centuries later.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just the visual arts in the North, right?
No, not at all.
What about literature?
Oh, literature.
Yeah.
The Northern Renaissance saw flowering of literature as well.
Okay.
We already talked about Erasmus and his contribution to humanist thought,
Yeah.
but we can't talk about Northern Renaissance literature without talking about the English Renaissance
Yeah, true.
and Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. His plays are still performed and studied today
I know.
all over the world.
They are, yeah.
What do you think makes his work so enduringly popular?
I think it's his ability to explore those universal themes.
Okay.
Love, ambition, revenge, the human condition. And he does it with such depth and eloquence.
His characters are so relatable,
They are.
and his language is just, it's beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's no wonder his work transcends time and culture.
Yeah. Was Shakespeare the only one, though?
Oh, no.
Anyway.
No, there were many other talented writers.
Okay.
Christopher Marlowe,
Okay.
Edmund Spenser,
Mm-hmm.
Sir Thomas More.
Wow, so they had this whole scene happening there.
They did.
Yeah.
They wrote poetry, drama, philosophical treatises.
Yeah.
And they really enriched the English language.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this burst of creativity across art forms in the North.
Yeah.
Painting, literature, music, and it's all rooted in that spirit of humanism and the rediscovery of those classical ideas.
Exactly. But it wasn't just a one-way flow of influence from Italy.
Right.
The North had its own ideas.
Okay.
And innovations that contributed to the broader Renaissance.
So it was a two-way street.
It was this dynamic exchange of ideas.
Yeah.
Both sides influencing and enriching each other.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's really important to remember, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't just Italy telling everyone else what to do.
Yeah.
It was this back and forth.
Exactly. For instance, the music of the Northern Renaissance.
Okay.
With its intricate polyphony and focus on vocal harmony, it had a huge influence on Italian composers.
Wow, that's amazing. So it was like a true cross-pollination of ideas.
It was.
With different regions bringing their own things to the table.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, did the Renaissance spread beyond those core areas?
You mean beyond Italy and Hungary and Northern Europe?
Yeah, like what about places like Poland or Spain?
Good question. The Renaissance wasn't limited to just those few places.
Yeah.
It spread to many other parts of Europe.
Okay.
And each place had its own unique take on those Renaissance ideas.
Let's start with Poland. What was their role in all of this?
Poland had what's often called its golden age during the Renaissance.
Oh, wow.
It was a time of peace and stability.
Okay.
So the arts and sciences really flourished.
Yeah.
Their architecture, for example,
Yeah.
combined Italian Renaissance elements with local traditions.
Okay.
And it created these really ornate and distinctive buildings. And you also see a surge in Polish literature. Writers like Mikołaj Ray and Jan Kochanowski,
Okay.
producing works that helped to solidify the Polish language and their national identity.
So it seems like the Renaissance in Poland was closely tied to the development of their national identity.
It was.
Were there any specific events or institutions that contributed to this cultural blossoming?
Yeah, one of the most significant was the rise of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow.
Okay.
It became this renowned center of learning, attracting scholars from all over.
And wasn't Copernicus a student there?
He was.
Oh, wow.
Nicholas Copernicus, the guy who proposed the heliocentric theory.
It's crazy to think he was part of this vibrant Polish intellectual scene.
It really is. It highlights how interconnected everything was.
Yeah.
Ideas were flowing across borders.
Yeah.
Scholars were collaborating,
Yeah.
building on each other's work.
And this exchange of ideas wasn't just happening in Europe,
Right.
right? You've got the exploration of new lands,
Yeah.
the discovery of new cultures. That must have played a huge role in shaping the Renaissance worldview.
Absolutely. Those voyages, led by people like Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama, they opened up these whole new horizons,
Yeah.
brought back knowledge of these distant lands and cultures,
Yeah.
and it fueled curiosity.
Yeah.
It challenged traditional ways of thinking.
I
It
bet.
created a sense of wonder and possibility.
I can imagine those explorers' tales captivating people's imaginations.
Yeah, it was like they were bringing back pieces of a whole new world.
Exactly. They were expanding what people thought was possible.
Exactly.
And Portugal, with their expertise in sailing,
Yeah,
they must have been at the forefront of these explorations.
they were, absolutely.
Okay, so how did the Renaissance look in Portugal?
Well, you can see it in their architecture.
Right.
They have this distinctive style called Manueline.
Okay.
It incorporates all these maritime elements inspired by their voyages.
So they were really proud of their sailing achievement.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And their literature flourished, too.
Oh.
Writers like Luis de Camões,
Okay.
he chronicled their epic explorations in his poem As Lusíadas,
Wow.
celebrating Portuguese history and those global explorations.
So their Renaissance was really connected to their identity as a seafaring nation
It was.
and their expanding global reach.
Yeah, it's like their exploration of the seas mirrored their exploration of new ideas and artistic expression.
That's a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Spain?
Spain.
How did they experience this cultural change?
Well, like Portugal, Spain's Renaissance was a mix of those Italian influences and their own rich heritage.
Okay.
And it all unfolded against this backdrop of intense religious fervor and imperial expansion.
Okay.
So you get this fascinating combination of artistic, literary, and intellectual achievements.
So how did those Italian Renaissance ideas even get to Spain?
Well, it seems they entered first through the Crown of Aragon's Mediterranean territories,
Yeah,
especially the city of Valencia.
Okay.
And some of the early Spanish Renaissance writers were from that region.
Okay, like who?
Ausias March and Joano Martorell.
Okay, so those ideas kind of arrived on the coast and moved inland.
It seems that way, yeah.
Okay.
And the Crown of Castile was also influenced by Italian humanism.
Interesting.
Writers like Íñigo López de Mendoza, the Marqués de Santillana.
Okay.
He introduced these new poetic forms from Italy in the early 15th century.
So the Italian ideas were inspiring Spanish writers and poets.
Yeah, and that continued throughout the Spanish Renaissance
Okay.
with writers like Jorge Manrique, Fernando de Rojas, Garcilaso de la Vega.
Wow.
They all drew inspiration from those Italian models.
So even though the spark came from Italy, the Spanish Renaissance ultimately evolved into something distinctly Spanish.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you see this shift most clearly in the mystical writings of figures like St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross.
Okay.
Their work reflects that really intense religious climate of Spain.
Yeah, I can see how that religious fervor would shape their experience in a unique way.
Definitely.
But it wasn't just religion.
No.
Right.
No.
They were also experiencing that massive imperial expansion with the Americas.
Yeah, the encounter with the New World had a huge impact on their thought and literature.
Okay.
Suddenly, they're exposed to these vast new territories, incredible diverse cultures.
Yeah.
It challenged their beliefs.
Wow.
And inspired new forms of expression.
It must have been mind-boggling to realize the world was so much bigger than they thought.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Did any writers specifically talk about this experience of exploration and colonization?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, who was writing about all this?
Oh, yeah. There were figures like Inca Garcilaso de la Vega,
Okay.
who chronicled Inca history and culture,
Wow.
and Bartolomé de las Casas,
Okay.
who advocated for the rights of indigenous people.
It's amazing how they were grappling with those complex issues back then.
Yeah, their accounts give us these valuable insights into this pivotal period.
It wasn't just about celebrating European achievements.
Right.
It was also about the ethical challenges,
Mm-hmm.
the consequences of exploration and conquest.
Exactly. And you see that reflected in their art and literature.
Yeah.
Like in the paintings of El Greco.
Oh, yeah, El Greco.
His style really bridged the late Renaissance and early Baroque periods.
His paintings are so intense and emotional.
They are, yeah.
I love them.
Me too.
It's like they capture that religious fervor of the Spanish Renaissance.
Yeah. And speaking of capturing the spirit of the era,
Yeah.
we can't forget about Miguel de Cervantes.
Oh, yeah, and Don Quixote.
Don Quixote.
Yeah.
This classic of Western literature.
Yeah.
It satirizes chivalry,
Mhm.
explores those themes of idealism, disillusionment, the human condition.
It's so good.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And it captures the spirit of the Spanish Golden Age, which
Yeah.
coincided with the later stages of the Renaissance.
It's amazing how those Spanish figures, from explorers and writers to artists,
Yeah.
they were engaging with such big topics.
I know, right?
And their works still resonate with us.
They do.
Yeah.
It gives us a window into that world.
Yeah, a world that was changing so much.
It was a time of immense change.
And upheaval.
Yeah.
But also this remarkable creativity and intellectual exploration.
Absolutely.
So we've seen how that Renaissance spirit spread all over Europe.
Yeah.
It adapted to all these different cultural contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And it sparked all this innovation in art, literature, science, exploration.
It's a testament to the power of ideas,
Yeah.
to go beyond borders and inspire creativity and change.
It makes you wonder how it shaped our world today.
It's a great question, and one we'll continue to explore as we go on. But for now, let's take a break
Okay.
and reflect on what we've learned.
Sounds good.
We'll be back soon to wrap up our journey.
Okay. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our Renaissance deep dive. I'm still thinking about all the amazing art, the science, the exploration.
It's really incredible how much happened during that time.
It is. It makes you appreciate just how energetic and innovative that era was.
It really does. And it shows how those core values of the Renaissance, humanism, curiosity, that pursuit of knowledge, they're still relevant today.
Yeah, true. You're right. Like the word Renaissance has taken on this life of its own. It's not just about that specific historical period anymore.
Right.
We use it to describe any time when there's a big intellectual or artistic flourishing,
Exact.
like a resurgence of creativity.
Awakening.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Harlem Renaissance, the Bengal Renaissance.
Even the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah, they all share that same spirit.
That revitalization.
Yeah, and reimagining the past.
Exactly.
But even as we celebrate the achievements of the Renaissance, we can't forget that it wasn't perfect, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It's important to avoid romanticizing the past.
Yeah.
The Renaissance, like any other period in history, had its own problems and contradictions.
Mm-hmm. It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line.
It's not, no.
And even when there's huge advancements, you still have all those human flaws and societal challenges.
Sure.
And speaking of challenges, some historians actually argue that the term Renaissance itself is problematic.
Interesting.
They say it's just this clean break from the Middle Ages,
Right.
which might not be how those transitions happened.
It's true. There's always this debate among historians about how much of a rebirth the Renaissance really was. Some say it was more of a continuation of medieval trends.
Yeah.
Others emphasize its unique characteristics and how it led to the modern era.
So it's like history is always open to interpretation.
Always.
And new evidence can change how we see the past.
Exactly. It's important to be critical.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that there are many different perspectives.
But even with all these debates and nuances, there's something really captivating about the Renaissance, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
It was a time when it felt like human potential had no limits.
Yeah. What do you think caused that explosion of creativity and innovation?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I think a big factor was that focus on human ingenuity and the importance of questioning the world.
Right. Renaissance thinkers weren't satisfied with just accepting what they were told.
They wanted to know more.
They wanted to know why.
They wanted to explore, to experiment.
And they believed in the power of human reason.
It's like they were saying, don't just take things at face value, investigate, challenge the status quo.
Exactly.
Do you think there's something we can learn from that today?
Oh, absolutely. That spirit of inquiry, that willingness to question,
Yeah.
it's more relevant than ever.
Yeah, because we live in a world where we're bombarded with information.
So much information
At time.
all the time.
Yeah. So it's crucial to develop those critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
To navigate all that and to figure out what's true.
That's a good point.
The Renaissance reminds us that knowledge is power, but it's how you use that knowledge that really matters.
Yeah, so it wasn't just about rediscovering classical knowledge.
No.
It was about applying that knowledge in new and innovative ways.
Exactly.
Pushing the boundaries. And you can see that in the legacy the Renaissance left behind.
From the art we admire to the scientific discoveries
that shape our world today.
to the literature.
Yeah, it continues to influence us.
But beyond those tangible things, there's also a deeper message.
What's that?
It's about fostering that love of learning, embracing curiosity.
Pursuing knowledge.
Yeah, for its own sake.
It's a lifelong journey, isn't it?
It is. There's always something new to discover.
Always.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Renaissance, I keep thinking about how the past can inform the future.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we saw how Renaissance thinkers were inspired by those classical ideas, but they also created groundbreaking new things.
It's like they were standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, reaching for something new and amazing.
That's a great way to put it. It shows that progress isn't just about breaking away from the past. It's about recognizing the value of tradition, learning from those who came before us, building on what they started.
It's like a dance.
It is a delicate dance between respecting the past and creating the future.
Yeah, I love that.
It captures that balance perfectly.
It's a balance we still need today, don't we?
We do.
We need to look to the past for guidance, but also adapt
And evolve.
and create something new.
Exactly.
So I guess the Renaissance continues to inspire us in so many ways.
It does, yeah.
We see it in that revival of classical art and architecture, the ongoing pursuit of scientific discovery.
And the power of those stories that explore what it means to be human.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe most importantly, we see it in that spirit of curiosity, that thirst for knowledge, that belief that we can shape a better world.
Those are some powerful lessons.
They are.
Especially for the world we live in today.
Yeah, definitely.
So to wrap up our Renaissance deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If the Renaissance was so heavily influenced by those classical ideas,
Yeah.
Why was there so much groundbreaking innovation?
Mm.
What can we learn from how the past and the future interacted?
That's a great question. It shows that innovation isn't always about creating something totally new.
Right.
It can be about reimagining the old, finding inspiration in the past,
Hmm.
using it to create fresh perspectives and new solutions.
Yeah, because we're all part of this bigger story, right?
Exactly.
Building on the work of those who came before us.
But also trying to make our own mark.
And with that, we'll leave you to continue your own exploration of the Renaissance.
It's an amazing journey.
It is full of wonder and inspiration.
And so many possibilities for discovery.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those imaginations going.